Hello and welcome back to This Day in History. It is July 30th, 2024. And as you know, it's not about the year, it's about the history of the date and all the things that had happened in all throughout our human history. So we have a few birthdays and we have some interesting discoveries and some first accomplishments and important legislation that has impacted our country, high prolific individuals. So yeah, let's just get into it, shall we? First off, um, birthdays. It is on this day in 1863 that Henry Ford, he was an American industrialist and automaker. Um, I'm sure if you've heard of Ford Motor Company, that bears his name. He was the first to actually uh, introduce the assembly line into, and that's where he comes from. Him being an industrialist, that's where he got his start. He had introduced the concept of an assembly line for mass production, and it was a game changer in manufacturing and just areas of production. Um, what got him into automaking was that, so at the time they were developing kerosene, right? Kerosene was a fuel source for lighting your lanterns and whatnot. And a byproduct of the making of kerosene was gasoline, and they didn't know what to do with it. It was they found that it was less volatile than kerosene, and Henry Ford, actually what he did is he bought up all of the gasoline byproduct, and then he built the automobile, the modern automobile that as we know it with a combustion engine. He built it around the use of that byproduct, and it was a game changer. He really industrialized the automaker industry, and like he was just, that's why Ford is so popular today, because realistically it's, while the very first vehicles that we had was actually like steam combusted engines, and they predate the Model T and the Model A and all that. But yeah, so it's Henry Ford's birthday. I'm sure the Ford Motor Company is probably having some big to do about it. I don't know, but yeah. So he was born on this day in 1863. 1898, we have a Henry Moore. He was a British artist. He was born in Castleford, England, and he died in England in 1986, I believe. Moving right along, we go back to the year is 1936. This is the year my stepdad was born. This guy was born on this day in 1936. His name was Buddy Guy. He was an American blues musician. He was known for his slashing guitar riffs and his passionate vocals. He was born in Lettsworth, Louisiana. Um, we fast forward to 1947. That's the year that my father was born. But it's also the year that Arnold Schwarzenegger was born. Today is Arnold Schwarzenegger's birthday. And if you don't know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is, you've been under a rock. He is Australian American, as in he was born in Austrian, I should say, not Australian. He was born in Austria. He immigrated to the United States. He was a world champion athlete in bodybuilding. That's kind of where he got his big claim to fame. He had this big, huge, muscular physique because he was an athlete in the bodybuilding world. He's an actor. He's been a politician. He was the governor of California. Um, on side note, I can honestly say that I was actually distantly related to him at one point, because Maria Shriver, his ex-wife, who is a Kennedy. I'm related to the Kennedys, and so I, once upon a time, I could say that he was a very distant cousin-in-law, and now I can't say that anymore. But their daughter is married to Chris Pratt, so I could say that I am a very distantly related cousin-in-law to Star-Lord from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, happy birthday, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Despite that you did my kin dirty and you cheated on her and all that, you're still one of my favorite actors, and I love your work. So, wish you hadn't done my kin dirty, but at the same time, I'm not innocent either. I am, yeah, we're human. So, no judgments. So, hope you have a blessed birthday, and may you live long and prosper, as they say in Star Trek. I don't know why I said that, but whatever. In 1958, Kate Bush is a British singer-songwriter, born on this day, 1958. Richard Linklater, born 1960, is an American filmmaker. I almost couldn't read my own chicken scratch there. 1961, Lawrence Fishburne, an amazing American actor. He got his start, actually, and he was the cowboy on Pee-wee's Playhouse, the Saturday morning cartoon variety type. Well, it wasn't really a cartoon, but it was a Saturday morning show for kids. I used to tune in every day, or every Saturday rather, when I was a kid. And that's one of his first gigs. He was the cowboy in that show. And then, of course, he later on went in to do other films. He's probably most well known for the Matrix movies, where he plays Morpheus, I think was the name of the character. He had done CSI, where he was like the main CSI boss, lead scientist, investigator, whatever his title was. He's a great actor. I mean, I love his work. He's done so much in his career. It's there's just so much there that I can't list it all. And finally, Christopher Nolan, British director Christopher Nolan. You might know he directed the Dark Knight Batman series movies, and he's done a bunch of other stuff too. But a phenomenal director. His birthday is today. He was born in 1970, and that's the birthdays. So we go back to 1540 is the year. Lutheran clergyman Robert Barnes is burned as a heretic. Now, here's the crappy thing about it, right? So he's basically burned for heresy after being used by Thomas Cromwell and King Henry VII. This guy, he is such a bad man. So they used him to gain European support for their anti-papal movement in England. What's anti-papal? The anti-Catholic Church. If you recall from previous videos that I've done, Henry VII had an issue with the Catholic Church because he wanted to get divorced, and the Catholic Church said that's a sin, you can't do that. And then he said, F you, I'm the king. I am going to do what I want to do. And so he separated himself from the Catholic Church, started the Church of England, where he named himself the head of it. And he got European support for, because there's this growing Reformation at this point, sweeping all through Europe and that's where the non-denominational Protestant churches all stemmed from, first of all, for Martin Luther, when he tacked his 95-point thesis on the front door of the diocese there, the Catholic diocese there, and where he basically told them, here are 95 points that I see where you are sinning, where you are going against the Bible, you are sinning against God, and you need to reform. And that's how the Lutheran Church got started. And as the Lutheran Church got started, other churches, whether you're a Presbyterian or you're a Methodist or you're a Baptist or you're a Calvinist or, all those that branched out were largely because of the rift and the shift in and ideologies, shifting away from Catholicism. And so this Lutheran Lutheran clergyman, Robert Barnes, he had a hand in helping with that Reformation, as it were, in England. And as for his trouble, he he was basically burned at the stake, and he was declared a heretic and burned at the stake. And you know, it's like, thanks for nothing. I mean, I'm finding that the more I read on history of King Henry the Eighth, I really don't like him. He really is a ruthless bastard. He really is. So fast forward to the 20th century. In 1921, insulin is first isolated as a pancreatic extract. And who discovered this? Well, a couple of Canadian scientists, Sir Frederick G. Banting and Charles H. Best. It's because of these guys that we know that insulin is beneficial for blood sugars and all that. And so we know now that, like, for diabetics, if your blood sugar's too high and you need some insulin to counteract that, well, it's because these two guys have discovered that insulin was an extract from the pancreas. And it's all relative. I don't quite understand all of it because I'm not a doctor. My stepdad lived with type 1 diabetes. My father is, he's type 2 diabetic. I'm probably there. I just don't care. I know I should, but I tend to be a lot like my stepdad, where I just kind of have this, I'm just going to live and have a I don't care attitude. The closest I do about caring about life and all that is that I do take my blood pressure medication, which I need to do after I do this video. 1930, Uruguay defeats Argentina in the World Cup. We're talking, they call it football. I call it soccer because it's soccer. It is not football. But Argentina wins the very first World Cup. And that's in 1930. So the very first World Cup that was ever established was in 1930, and it was Uruguay who had defeated Argentina. 1942, we see Frank Sinatra, who sang with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. He would record. He would perform his last recording with that orchestra before going on a solo tour. And if you know anything about Frank Sinatra, he was huge. He had a great career, a great solo career. 1945, the USS Indianapolis was sunk by a Japanese submarine. 900 were killed, died. If they didn't die right away from the sinking, they died from like shark attacks and dehydration, salt poisoning. Just, horrifically brutal deaths because they, while they're waiting to be rescued. Why is this so significant and so interesting? Well, because the USS Indianapolis actually had delivered key components for the atom bombs that were used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And had the Japanese destroyer got to that ship, days before, well, we would have lost our opportunity to have used the atom bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that was fortuitous, I suppose. 1956, In God We Trust it legally becomes the national motto for the United States. Now, mind you, this is during the McCarthy era, where everyone feared the big bad communist boogeyman. And so it was McCarthy and a lot of his cronies, in their, trying to stamp out communism in the United States. They wanted to firmly reaffirm that the United States is a Christian nation. So they started doing things like putting "In God We Trust" on our monetary notes, our dollar bills. They put in our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, that the line where it says "Under God" was added into the pledge. It was, basically that they were just enforcing the notion that, God is our God, not communism, not the state, not the, um, the federal government isn't our God. We subscribe to a higher being. And some would argue, well, that was a violation of separation from church and state. No, it's not. And I've explained this before. I'll explain it again. Separation of church and state had everything to do with whether a national church was to be established in the United States. That's it. Has nothing to do with whether or not you can have the Ten Commandments in a courthouse. It has nothing to do with whether or not you know you have a Bible in a classroom. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the establishment of a state-sanctioned church, like the Church of England. That was the example. That was the example that Thomas Jefferson used. The separation, and a lot of people will say that, well, separation of church and state, it's in the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. No, it's not. It was never a constitutional doctrine. It was never a Declaration of Independence doctrine. What it was is that it was a Jeffersonian doctrine, i.e., think of like an executive order that still is in use today. Like the law has invoked this executive order, and basically it's a presidential order saying we are not going to do this. We are not going to establish this, and every administration since Jefferson followed suit, and so laws have been drafted to kind of like pigeonhole what they think that means, and then these laws get challenged, and like people invoke their religion in the course of doing their government duties. I'm thinking in terms of the court clerk that refused to issue a license of marriage for a gay couple due to her religious convictions. She, of course, got fired. They claimed separation of church and state was being violated when really it's not. She could do that, but the policies of that state and certain laws said otherwise. But I mean, that's a separate issue altogether. So, In God We Trust was first officially legally becoming our motto in 1956. 1965, President Johnson, LBJ, he signs amendments to the Social Security Act of 1935, essentially establishing Medicare and Medicaid. So anyone who really doesn't know their history and about Social Security and the Charlie Foxtrot that it was, and the sham on the American people that it was, they think it's a good thing, but it really wasn't. I mean, it was originally designed to be a 20-year program. It was supposed to sunset after 20 years, and then they just kept it in there. It was supposed to be voluntary. FDR said it was voluntary, and yet no sooner than it was passed than they made it mandatory. I mean, even FDR's own mother was like, this is voluntary, and my son's the president. I'm not going to pay this, and I don't have to pay this. Taxman said, well, yes, you do. And she says, again, this is voluntary. My son is the president, and I'm not going to pay this. And, it was reported to FDR, and he was like, well, throw him in jail. And they're like, we can't, sir. It's your mother. Bring me the tax bill. I'll pay it so she never has to know that it's actually being paid for. And in 65, they add Medicare and Medicaid. Now, I'm not saying there's certain things about it that aren't good. I mean, they are. I mean, it's good to be taking care of our elderly and our disabled and the like. But I mean, the thing is, like, don't go telling me that it's a, don't say it's not an entitlement when it is. I mean, before the 80s, when it was absorbed into the general fund, it was its own private, private account that, you paid into it your whole life, your whole working life, and you were entitled to that money. And so for congressmen and senators to say, you're not entitled to this, if you're taxing me every payday, yeah, I am. So Mitch McConnell, get that through your thick head that, yeah, I am entitled to it. I have been paying into it my whole adult life. You have paid into it your whole adult life, but you're okay. Because you're always going to have, even if you retire, and you live the rest of your life, you're going to be fine because you get special entitlements having been a servant of the government. So bugger off. 1975. The year is 1975. It's on this day, 1975, that Jimmy Hoffa, who was a former Teamsters president, he disappears under mysterious circumstances in Bloomfield, Michigan. It's widely believed that he was killed, probably due to the mafia, because he wouldn't play ball, or he pissed a lot of people off. So, I mean, who knows? I don't know that we'll ever know. There's been a lot of movies made of it, and there's been one movie recently where Robert De Niro, he played basically a mob hitman, and this character takes credit for killing Hoffa. He knew Hoffa personally. They were actually friends. I mean, Hoffa was like a surrogate uncle to this guy's kids, and so I mean, if that's true, if that story is true, then this mob enforcer basically bumped off Hoffa because he pissed off all the wrong people. 2007, we talked about this guy here recently, and I think it might have been because he had a birthday, possibly, but Swedish screenwriter and director Ingmar Bergman, he died on this day in 2007 at the age of 89. And the featured event for the day is the death of Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck was a prime minister of Prussia from 1862 to 1873. In 1873 to 1890. There's some overlap here because this is where it kind of confused me too. And I'll explain this in a moment. He used ruthlessness and moderation. I don't know that you can use moderation and ruthlessness at the same time. It seems like that's an oxymoron to me, but it says that he used ruthlessness and moderation to unify Germany. So all of Germania becomes a unified country. He founded the German Empire in 1871. So while he was the PM of Prussia, he's actually unifying, there toward the end of his reign there, he's actually unifying all of Germania into, what we now know of as Germany today. He served as their first chancellor from 1871 to 1890. So he's the chancellor of this German Empire while he's still PM, Prime Minister of Prussia. But it is on this day in 1898 that Otto von Bismarck would pass away. He was very influential in bringing Germany to prominence. He was very much respected and very much revered. Otto von Bismarck was someone that others had looked up to. Kaiser Wilhelm looked up to him. Hitler even looked up to him. And it's one of those things where they revered him as, they revered him much as like we Americans revere George Washington. I don't know if you can really compare the two, but that's the best analogy I can come up with. So that concludes this day in history. Sorry that we've gone almost 25 minutes here. But there was some good stuff here. And I'm at my pastor's house. I'm house sitting for him. So I got to go take care of the yard, and I got to get ready for work here soon. Go about my day. It's 1 o'clock, and I have to be at work at 1:30. I'm not doing the gym today because I had to water plants. So got to water them every couple days. So I'm going to... those days I'm just not going to go to the gym. So, there we go. So, take care, be blessed, have a wonderful day, and we'll do this all again tomorrow for July 31st. And July 31st is a special day for me. It's the day I actually went to the Army 30 some years ago. But yeah, take care, be blessed, and we'll see you soon. Bye.